Welcome to the What the Future podcast webinar. In the before times, when we released a new issue of What the Future, it was kind of a big to-do. We hosted these amazing things called live events, where people would get together in a physical space. They'd fly in from all over. Hands would be shaken, backs would be slapped. Sometimes, people would even hug each other in greeting. And man, our events were cool. To celebrate our beauty issue, for instance, we threw an inclusive fashion show in the Flatiron District in New York City. And for our Vice issue, we hosted a panel in a cannabis-friendly venue in LA, catered by Chef Andrea Drummond, who opened the first ever legal cannabis restaurant in the US. She had an extraordinary cannabis-based menu planned until we checked with our legal team. And they were like, yeah, no, we abide by federal law. So nice try, but no effing way. And when they said that F didn't mean future. So we were at this Vice event, and my coworker Allison came up and said, I love the Vice issue. And I was like, yeah, it's amazing, all the data and insights we pack in there. I like it when people acknowledge the greatness of What the Future, like you're doing right now, nodding along at home. And she said, I think you should do an issue on waste. And I was like, WTF, poop? And she was like, no, not poop. Food waste. I was like, food waste? That's poop. But she went on to explain that in a past step on her career path, she worked in food packaging. She explained with some passion what a significant issue food waste is. Not only does it pile it up, but it's just so darn inefficient in the first place to spend so much effort producing something that winds up in a landfill unused. And she talked about how better packaging can make a difference. That's it. It's all about keeping food safe and fresh longer. And that market research can play a huge role in that. I took a deep breath and thought about it for a minute. But I admit, I was intrigued. Now here we are, and instead of meeting you all face-to-face at a live event, over cocktails, as it should be, I'm pre-taping a podcast in my COVID-19 bunker. I'm Matt Carmichael, the editor of What the Future, and VP of Editorial Strategy for Ipsos in North America. And I'll be your host today, as we talk through the future of waste. It's one of the most pressing environmental challenges we face. We've got a great episode lined up, exclusive new research, and amazing interviews. Let's dive in. This is a webinar masquerading as a podcast, or maybe the other way around. But here's how we're going to spend our time together. We're going to ask these questions. Must brands lead the way to a more sustainable world? Where should brands focus on sustainability? Can we guilt our way into wasting less food? Can brands leverage COVID-19 to boost sustainability? We'll talk about batteries and how we power our existence without powering ourselves out of existence. And related, in terms of one key industry using batteries, how can automakers sell the advantages of electric vehicles? Can we waste less stuff by wasting less time? And finally, how can we elevate the customer experience for the experience economy? So that's our program for today. Along the way, we'll hear from some key players in this space and explore exclusive new Ipsos research about these important topics. There's actually a lot of good news in the data, so stay tuned. But first, we've got one big, bad stat. It was fitting that as I went to record this, the garbage truck came through my alley. Really, I ran outside and recorded this B-roll. But it's a sound we hear too much in this world and in this nation because we produce way too much waste. The average American produces almost a ton of waste each year, making the U.S. the highest per capita producer of garbage in the world. Globally, people say it's the second biggest problem behind climate change, which, to be clear, is a real thing and created by humans. It's also fitting that we're doing this webinar about waste at the tag end of this dumpster fire of a year. But I'll admit, the first thing when I think about waste is poop, because I was once a 9-year-old boy. And like many Gen Xers, the second thing I think about when I think about waste is Iron Eyes Cody. Iron Eyes Cody starred in a famous public service announcement from Keep America Beautiful about pollution and littering. This PSA put a human face on a problem that was easy to depersonalize. In so doing, it helped shape a generation of environmentalists. As one YouTube commentator said, "I have a vivid memory of this commercial. It was powerful for a preteen growing up in the 70s. As an aside, it turns out Iron Eyes Cody was born Espera Oscar de Corte and was Sicilian, not Native American. Ugh, Hollywood. The good news is that our profession, market research, is in a position to align our business goals with real-world solutions to this massive problem. Ipsos has worked with Evian, for instance, to make embossed bottles that are easier to recycle than plastic bottles with label on them. In this podcast, you'll hear how research helps develop innovative new packaging that reduces waste from all sorts of products, from toothpaste to food. Research helps us understand what will drive consumer adoption of less polluting energy technologies, like battery-operated electric vehicles in homes. Research helps get into the mindset of those who worry about wasting the precious commodity of time, and who want to reduce waste not just by consuming better, but by consuming less. And the thing is, consumers want you, all of you listening, to help. They want brands to enable their own efforts to reduce and reuse and make less of a footprint. Research can also guide brands in how to communicate all this good work to the customer in a way that feels authentic, even when you're talking about not so glamorous business disciplines like procurement and supply chain management. Think about how farm to table made supply chains sexy for the food industry. It can be done. Sure, some solutions will cost more, but the good news is that most consumers realize that there's a trade-off, and younger consumers especially are willing to invest in this greener, more sustainable future. My colleague Kate MacArthur spoke to Ann Tracy, Chief Sustainability Officer for Colgate-Palmolive. The packaged goods manufacturer is home to the world's most prevalent brand. Colgate is in more households worldwide than any other product. That adds up to 8 billion tubes of toothpaste in a year. So she's in a pretty good place to talk about the role of corporations in sustainability. She says that the pandemic has really shone a light on how much waste we produce. Our habits and behaviors have changed, and not necessarily in good ways for the environment. She thinks customers drive corporate behavior, especially, and we see this in our data, parents. But she also thinks that even without that feedback loop, companies have a responsibility on their end too. Here's what she had to say.
We sell 8 billion tubes of toothpaste every year. We believe we have a responsibility with that kind of reach to people to help them live more sustainable lives and to help them understand how they can contribute and little actions that they can take. You know, consumers want to do the right thing. They're not sure what to do. So they want their brands to help them live healthier and more sustainably.
Again, the good news is that consumers are looking for brands to lead, and they will reward that. About half have purchased brands or products specifically because of their sustainability practices. The flip side is true too. If you don't have a good reputation in this space, consumers will shun you and your brand. And 2/3 of people think that their purchase behaviors make a difference for the environment. Organizational sustainability is a broad topic and spans across R&D, procurement, supply chain, packaging, marketing. Even HR and office management have a role to play. So where should brands put their focus? We just said that people make purchase decisions based on their opinions of a company's sustainability practices. But pulling back that onion a bit, we find that consumers don't actually know a lot about what those practices are. Ipsos' Natalie Lacey suggests that companies need to ask themselves a series of questions, and brands can better understand what their consumers are looking for in terms of sustainability practices and how to tell that story to their buyers. Companies need to focus on their current environmental impacts and see how that aligns with their company values. Then there's the consumer side. You need to understand what specifically is important to them and how to help them feel empowered. And once you understand all of that landscape, you can find the sweet spot in the middle, something that your consumers will value, that aligns with your values, and that importantly, your company can commit to for the long term. Reputations aren't built overnight. Chris Malkowski is the CEO for the food business of Newell Brands. She joined in February 2020, right before the world fell apart. And while she's new to this role, she's not new to food preservation. She grew up on a farm and has been canning since she was 5 years old. Food waste, as observed at the outside of this discussion, is a big issue. And it's one where people carry a lot of guilt. We, as shoppers, feel bad throwing out unused food. Whether that's because we bought too much of it and never used it, or our plans changed and we only had enough energy to order carry-out one night instead of cooking those fresh ingredients we bought. And my parents always tried, and often failed, to play off that guilt of all the effort that went into growing those peas who were so sad to have lived in vain. But that failed, by the way, because of the personifying the veggies. I no longer wanted to eat them. That seemed sad, too. I was a complex kid. Speaking of kids, both Anne Tracy and Chris talked about kids, and even specifically their kids. As with many things, kids are both a problem and a solution to the problems. Wait, actually, come to think of it, I think that's what Homer Simpson said about beer. Anyway, on one hand, the next generation is driving a lot of our sustainability efforts, both directly, by badgering their parents to do better, and indirectly. Parents want to leave a better, or at least not substantially worse world for the kids. But Malkowski points out that when you have kids especially, it becomes harder to plan. Newell is working on products for that, storage containers that help to protect and preserve food longer, and are also reusable.
You think about all of the take-home type packages that are disposable. I see a real movement to walk away from throwaway plastics and to go toward packaging that you can use and reuse. We are launching this next year reusable bags on Rubbermaid, so you can use the same bag. It's dishwasher safe, and it will last at least 120 times versus a throwaway disposable bag. If people feel pressure from the youth, and sustainability and reusability is a big area, I just think corporations are going to have to address it.
To put some numbers behind all of this, people in an Ipsos survey reported feeling high levels of guilt about food they bought but never used. Or when they cook food but they don't eat it. They even feel bad throwing out food they tried and didn't like. Take that, peas! Malkowski sees better packaging as a way to assuage that guilt. Make it reusable. Make it functional to keep food longer and help support rather than guilt customers into better behavior. As a parent myself, I get it. I get the guilt. I get the waste. And I get the desire to have help with that. One comment that really stayed with me as we developed this issue came from Ashley Erickson, a VP in Ipsos' innovation practice. She was telling me that as the pandemic started, people were willing to make some short-term trade-offs. They were getting more takeout to support their favorite restaurants, which was a good thing. But that meant way more takeout waste, which they felt badly about. As the pandemic dragged on and restaurant struggles continued, it nevertheless became harder to justify those trade-offs. People wanted help on the environmental front. Like, if we're getting pandemic takeout, we probably don't need paper plates and plastic forks. Raise your hand if you've looked upon the amount of waste from a night's takeout with shame. I see a lot of hands up, which is a lie, because not only is this a webinar, it's a pre-recorded webinar. But hey, I raised my hand at least. Okay, let's change gears. That was a car pun, because we're going to talk about one of the important technologies going: batteries. They're a big reason that Tesla produces 1/10 as many cars as GM, but has a 10 times bigger market cap. Of course, they're not just for cars. Battery technology powers everything from our watches, to our phones, to medical devices, to even whole houses. Venkat Srinivasan helps create them. He's the director of Argonne Labs' Collaborative Center for Energy Storage Sciences, ACCESS for short. I say as a big fan of clever acronyms. And here's another case where people are looking for help and brands can offer that. People want to reduce their energy footprint. They want to do it to reduce costs, sure, but a nearly equal number want to do it because of their energy footprint. Think about it. Look at your desk. How many things in front of you right now are plugged in or need batteries? How many different chargers did you pack the last time you traveled? Hell, I even pack a small power strip when I hit the road. So this battery stuff is important. It's also not currently the most sustainable and waste-reducing technology out there. Venkat's working on that. He'd like to make a battery that lasts for 100 years. He also recognizes that batteries are only one part of the environmental solutions. Because batteries store electricity, they don't generate it. The generation side needs improvement too. But as batteries are developed, and batteries power bigger and bigger things more and more efficiently, that will come with trade-offs in the short term. Here's one example he gave us.
Batteries are all about compromises. So if you kind of think about a battery, there are multiple metrics you're trying to go after, right? So let's take an electric car, simple one. You want a driving range, right? I mean, you don't want it to be a 50-mile electric car. You want it to be 300 miles. You want it to charge fast. You want it to cost, as much as a gasoline car would cost. You want it to last a long time. You want it to be safe. You want to be able to park it in the Chicago winter for 24 hours, come back and start the car. And you don't want it to say, well, it's too cold, I can't start it. And you want to be able to use it in Arizona without any problems, right? And hopefully you want to make sure that the materials are coming from some sort of a renewable source, and you want to make sure it's recyclable. And guess what? All of these are, sort of very difficult metrics to meet simultaneously.
Trade-offs are an issue on the buying side, as well as the manufacturing side. All of those EV features that Venkat mentioned are features that buyers of electric vehicles really want. Power, range, reliability, affordability. But environmental aspects top the list according to an Ipsos ongoing syndicated Navigator survey of car owners in 11 countries. So the trick for automakers, and there are lessons to be learned here for other industries too, is how to communicate that these cars will solve these problems for people. Our data shows that people want really rational things from their EVs. Less pollution, less need for fuel, less maintenance, and the convenience to just plug it in at home. But behavioral science shows that's not enough. Humans are rarely rational, or at least solely rational. John Kaiser, who heads Ipsos's auto and mobility service line in the US, says that brands need to appeal to the emotional side as well. Talk about convenience, the sexiness of the styling and technology, and even the raw performance. Tesla isn't just about function. It's got those gull-wing doors and that grille-less front. You gotta play it at both sides of the brain. Homestretch time. Our final Q&A honestly didn't go in the direction I thought it would, but I think you'll agree it wound up someplace equally interesting. I reached out to James H. Gilmore because he was the guy who coined the phrase, and really an entire nomenclature around the experience economy. I wanted to talk about reducing waste by buying or gifting experiences instead of stuff. It's an idea we hear a lot about, especially with millennials and the younger iGen, that doing things is more important than owning things. And indeed, that shows up in our data. 2/3 of Americans value experiences more than material possessions. A majority have worked in the last year to Marie Kondo their sock drawers or clean out their attic and basements and otherwise weed out some of the stuff in their lives. I know I spent the early part and, well, the middle and more recent time in the pandemic winnowing some of the crap and old papers and other nonsense out of my life. I also spent some time therapy buying inflatable lawn ornaments, including 3 seasonal unicorns, so it might come out in a wash. But I digress. However, Jim really wanted to talk about was reducing waste in a different way, by reducing wasted time. Time, he said, is the commodity we value most. It's the currency of the experience economy in many ways. He suggests that if we put more value on time, and in fact charge for time instead of material costs, we'll wind up producing less waste. For instance, if we can mass customize products instead of mass produce them, we'll only produce what we need. But more importantly, if we charge for time, we'll be more efficient all around. Here's what he had to say.
I mean, wasted time, wasted land, wasted resources. If we charge for time, then people will make more money, more profits, using less resources to enable that time to be enjoyed. So that's why we got to move away from charging for physical things and for services, because it's inherently wasteful versus charging for time. And time is what people most value. They use goods, most of which they have to purchase. They contract for services because they want to enjoy their time. Well, let's charge for that time. And in the process, make more money by using less resources of the earth than if we're charging for all those resources.
And to my earlier point, many are looking to replace consumption with experiences. Research from Ipsos' Fresh Labs, syndicated online community, shows some way brands can respond. One is to provide long-term value. Consumers are looking to consume less by buying goods that will last longer and need replacement less often, or goods that can serve more than one purpose. They're also looking for devices and technologies that help them spend their time more meaningfully. So more than just entertainment, they want to be able to connect and share with friends and family. And finally, people are looking for things that they can experience both outside and also in their own home. Virtual cooking classes or gardening lessons compete with travel and other outdoor adventures. I trust that you did not find this a waste of your time, because I value your time, as I'm sure you do. Now, next month, Joe Biden will be inaugurated as our 46th president. It's been a rough go these last couple of years for our democracy. But that, especially how to pull it back across various divides, will be the topic of our next issue. What the Future? Democracy. Stay tuned, and we'll see you back here in January. You can find all of this great content free to download at future.ipsos.com. As always, this is Matt Carmichael for Ipsos, looking forward to a happy, healthy, or at least better 2021. Have a great new year, and we'll see you here next month.